My son slid the papers across the table, told me it was routine, and smiled like I was too old to read, but I read every word. And I signed. I signed knowing everything. The power of attorney, the financial transfers, the house title, all there, dressed up in tidy sentences and soft words like protection and security. My daughter-in-law sat beside him, nodding with that gentle, rehearsed smile she wore when she wanted something to look like love. They thought I didn't understand, that my hands were weak, my mind softer than it used to be. They whispered about my safety, about making things easier for me. But really, they were making things easier for themselves. I saw it all, the glances they exchanged. The lawyer who avoided my eyes while pretending to explain what I already knew, they thought they'd stolen everything that mattered while I sat there politely nodding. I didn't cry. I didn't protest. I let my signature glide across the paper like a woman defeated. But I wasn't defeated. I was patient. The house, my savings, my decisions, they believed all of it was theirs now. Taken. Neatly. With smiles. They mistook my silence for surrender. They always have. But while they stacked their papers and celebrated their quiet theft, I was counting, watching, measuring the storm they couldn't see gathering behind my calm face. They thought I was done, but I wasn't done. Not even close. I wasn't raised with much. We didn't have vacations or new clothes or shiny toys lined up under the tree. My mother stretched every dollar like dough, pulling it thin but never letting it tear. I learned early how to do the same. When I married, I thought love meant carrying the heavy end of things. And so, I carried. When my husband walked out, my son was still in grade school, small enough to wrap both arms around my leg when he was scared. I didn't have the luxury of falling apart. I worked, I cleaned, I fed him before I fed myself. Double shifts at the diner, ironing uniforms late into the night, patching up his winter coat year after year because new ones were too expensive. The coat always fit just fine after a little stitching. He never complained. Neither did I. The house was small, but it was ours. The roof leaked sometimes. The heat groaned on cold nights, but it held us. I made it warm with the smell of bread baking on Sundays and soup simmering on the stove after long days. I clipped coupons, stretched meals, made do. At Christmas, I put toys on layaway months in advance, slipping spare dollars into envelopes hidden inside my sewing basket. The tree sparkled with dollar store lights, but his face lit up brighter than any ornament. His wishes were simple. "Someday, I'll buy you a big house, Mom," he'd say. I'd smile and stroke his hair, saying, "You just be happy. That's enough for me." And I meant it. When he made the baseball team, I sat in that old Buick every practice, even when the heater barely worked, my breath making tiny clouds as I waited. When he won his first trophy, I clapped so hard my palms stung. I kept the photo on my nightstand for years, him beaming, holding that little plastic statue like it was gold. I worked overtime so he could go to college, folded every shirt he packed like it was armor, slipped $20 bills into the pockets of his jeans for just in case. I drove home from that campus drop-off alone, crying into my sleeves but proud, always proud. I thought, this is how it's supposed to be. Sacrifice now, joy later. Family first. The calls came less often after he married. Holidays grew shorter. Dinners skipped. "We're so busy, Mom." I understood. Or at least I told myself I did. His wife was polite at first. She'd bring side dishes to my table, move things around in my kitchen, as though my own hands hadn't placed everything just where it belonged. "You don't need to cook so much," she'd say with a smile. "Let us handle it." I swallowed my pride, let her rearrange my cabinets, my spices, my life. I thought love meant stepping back when you're no longer needed. The grandchildren came. I made their favorite cookies, bought little toys, saved what I could to bring them joy. But visits became quick, rushed. The laughter I'd once dreamed would fill my home now echoed only when they chose to bring it. I'd sit quietly as they gathered around my table, smiling while their conversations circled without me. They called less, came less, and when they did, they spoke about my house like it was already theirs. "You shouldn't have to worry about upkeep, Mom. These old houses are too much work for you. My daughter-in-law would run her hand along my counters, suggesting new cabinets, lighter colors. My son said little, but his silence said enough. Still, I try to believe the best. They're worried about me. They're busy. They mean well. That's what I told myself every night as I folded my hands under my pillow. But the warmth that once filled this family had turned cool. Transactions replaced tenderness. Safety turned into control. The woman who once rocked my son to sleep now needed permission to open her own cabinets. The mother who worked 2 jobs to keep the lights on was now a burden to be managed. I wasn't blind. I saw the shift long before they thought I did. The coldness dressed itself as care. The questions that started to sound like preparation. Do you have the deed somewhere safe, Mom? Have you signed those new papers? The jokes masked in smiles. You don't need a full fridge anymore, do you? No need to keep the old furniture, less clutter. It was happening piece by piece, quietly, gently. The taking had begun long before they slid those papers across the table. But I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I sat still, listening, watching, calculating every small withdrawal from a life I had poured everything into. I had given them my youth, my strength, my best years. I had cooked, cleaned, saved, and sacrificed, not for wealth or recognition, but for love, for family, for the simple dream of hearing laughter in my home and knowing I had built something lasting. But when the time came, they didn't offer me comfort. They offered control, a soft betrayal masked in kindness, and I let them believe I didn't see it, but I saw it. I saw everything. At first, it was little things. The kind of things a mother tells herself not to worry about. The visits became shorter. The phone calls, once full of laughter and stories, turned into quick check-ins. My son's voice always sounded rushed. Sorry, Mom, busy day. The kids have practice. We'll talk longer next time. I clung to those next times. I made excuses for him. Life gets busy. Children grow. People have obligations. That's what I told myself while sitting at my kitchen table. The same one I once scrubbed late at night after he finished his homework. The same one where I packed his lunches every morning. But slowly, those little things stacked into something heavier. When they did come over, they didn't come to visit. They came with suggestions. My daughter-in-law brought brochures about estate planning. She smiled as she laid them on my table, right where my coffee cup usually sat. It's just smart to get things in order, Mom. You don't want surprises later. She laughed lightly, as if we were discussing new curtains instead of my life. One afternoon, while stirring the soup I made for their visit, my son casually asked, "Do you still handle your own bills, Mom? I mean, it must be overwhelming. All those payments, all those statements. Maybe we should help with that, just to make it easier on you." His voice was soft, his smile gentle, but something in his eyes didn't match. I swallowed hard and smiled back, pretending to think. "I've been managing fine," I said, stirring the pot slower. They kept bringing it up. "You don't have to do this alone," she'd say. "We're just trying to help." The word help became a blanket they kept trying to wrap around me, soft but suffocating. My son mentioned power of attorney over coffee one day, slipping the term into conversation like it was casual. "It's just paperwork, Mom. You'd still have control. We'd just be able to step in if anything happened. You know, just in case. Just in case." That phrase became their anthem. The anthem of polite thieves. But I smiled. I nodded. Because what mother wants to believe her own child would take advantage of her? Not me. Not after everything I had done. Not after all the years I had scraped and clawed to give him every chance. My love for him was so large it blinded me. Or maybe I let it blind me, because the alternative was too painful. I told myself I was being silly, that I was imagining things. After all, they were busy with their own lives. The kids had school, sports, birthdays. They had careers, responsibilities. Surely I shouldn't expect them to drop everything for me. That's not what a good mother does. So I waited for them to call. I waited for the holidays that kept getting postponed. I waited for the grandchildren who were always too busy this weekend. Maybe next time. But then the jokes began. Soft, almost playful, but sharp beneath the surface. You don't need all these groceries, Mom. Who are you cooking for anyway? My daughter-in-law started clearing out my pantry, tossing cans into the trash. Less clutter, less to worry about, she smiled. My son chuckled. We've got to help you simplify. My kitchen, once my sanctuary, began to look foreign. Bare shelves, rearranged cabinets. I stood quietly as they peeled away my home layer by layer. Then came the meeting. The day they called it a family conversation. My son sat at the table, my table, avoiding my gaze. His wife took the lead, her tone sweet and polished. We found a wonderful facility, Mom. You'll have friends there, activities, full care. No more stress for you. She slid the glossy brochure toward me, images of smiling elderly women, playing cards under pastel lighting. I glanced at it, my stomach twisting. I don't need full care, I whispered. My son reached for my hand, patting it like I was already halfway gone. We just want what's best for you, Mom. You've worked so hard. Let us take care of the hard stuff now. The words pressed against my chest like a heavy stone. I looked at my santh boy. I once sat beside during fevers. The boy I fed before I fed myself. The boy I drove to practice in the snow while my own fingers went numb. And I realized then, finally, that the love I gave him had not taught him loyalty. It had taught him comfort. My sacrifices were a ladder he had climbed, and now, from where he stood, I was simply a burden, something to be handled. That night, lying awake in my too quiet house, I finally allowed myself to admit what I hadn't wanted to believe. This wasn't about care. This wasn't about love. This was preparation. They were setting the stage. Piece by piece, they were lining up their move to take everything I had worked for. My instincts sharpened like a blade. The storm had begun. They just didn't know I could see it forming, and I would not close my eyes again. The day they finalized it all, I barely recognized my own life. They called it just another step, a formality to make things easier. My son sat across from me at the polished oak table in the lawyer's office, his voice calm, his hands folded neatly. My daughter-in-law perched beside him, smiling softly, like we were discussing curtain patterns. The lawyer laid out the documents in tidy piles, each page clean, official, heavy with legal language I didn't need to read. But I read them anyway, slowly, carefully. The words blurred together: power of attorney, transfer of ownership, financial custodianship. My son's voice softened, the way it used to when he wanted to borrow the car as a teenager. It's just paperwork, Mom. This way we can handle things if anything happens. You don't want to stress about bills anymore, do you? My daughter-in-law added quickly, it's for your safety. Everything stays in the family. The room was bright, too bright. The fluorescent lights hummed faintly above us. The lawyer avoided my eyes as he slid the pen toward me. My son kept his smile steady, as though my hesitation was something to be managed, like a child reluctant to take her medicine. We're here for you, Mom, he said softly. I saw their eyes flick to each other for a split second, a silent confirmation. I held the pen. My hand trembled, not from weakness, but from the weight of what I already knew. This wasn't help. This wasn't love. This was a handover, a quiet theft dressed in smiles, and I signed. My name, written in my own handwriting, on every single page. The papers bore my signature, but not my permission. In the weeks that followed, everything moved quickly, quietly. My bank accounts were consolidated for easier management. I wasn't consulted. The statements stopped arriving. My credit cards were canceled. My utilities were transferred out of my name. They framed it all as kindness, as efficiency. Don't worry, Mom, we'll take care of it. My house, my home was listed without my consent. We found a buyer who's willing to pay full price. It'll take the burden off you. My daughter-in-law smiled as she said it, sipping her tea from one of my cups. She was comfortable there, already living inside the life I built. And then came the facility. They called it managed care. The brochure boasted clean rooms, warm meals, activities, friendly staff. It's safer, Mom. You'll love it. No more worrying about that big house by yourself. I was driven there like a guest being dropped off for a vacation I never booked. My belongings were reduced to a few boxes. My rocking chair. A few framed photos they chose for me. The rest, the cabinets, the kitchen I'd poured years into, was left behind. Sold. The room was small. Pale yellow walls. A single window with a view of a parking lot. The bed was too firm. The thermostat locked behind a plastic case I couldn't open. The nurses called me sweetheart and darling. Their voices slow and syrupy, as if I had lost not only control but comprehension. Every morning, they handed me pills in a small plastic cup. These help keep you nice and calm, honey. I swallowed without protest. My voice had already been taken from me. I sat at the window most days, hands folded in my lap, watching the cars come and go. The photos on my little shelf were theirs family vacations, smiling children I rarely saw. I wasn't in a single one. My world had been reduced to soft music in the background, bingo games I didn't want to play, and polite conversations where I was spoken to, not with. I had become an object to manage, a task to complete. They had taken everything while smiling. They visited occasionally, always cheerful, always bringing little gifts, scarves, lotions, bright sweaters I never asked for. They sat for short, polite visits. My daughter-in-law would talk about how busy the children were, how work kept them running. My son would glance at his watch often, squeezing my hand gently before leaving. "We just want you to be comfortable, Mom," he'd say, as though comfort was something they still understood. But behind my polite nods, behind my quiet yeses, a storm gathered. Every cheerful lie, every false kindness, every small theft wrapped in sweet words built something cold and sharp inside me. My life was not theirs to organize. My house was not theirs to sell. My money was not theirs to safeguard. They had written me out of my own story, politely, gently, legally. And they thought I didn't notice. But I noticed everything. The days blurred into routine inside that facility. Breakfast trays, bingo games, soft voices calling me sweetheart, as though my name had been misplaced along with my freedom. But while the world around me dulled, my mind sharpened. I sat still. I smiled when they visited. I nodded politely at the nurses. I hummed along to the music that played in the activity room. But inside, I was watching, measuring, collecting. Every conversation became a record. Every slip of the tongue, every new decision they made on my behalf without my consent, I logged it all. My son would visit, smile, and say things like, "Don't worry, Mom. We've moved your accounts into a new portfolio. It's safer this way." Safer for who, I wondered. My daughter-in-law would mention, "The house sale went through faster than we expected. We took care of everything for you." She said it like it was a favor, like I should be grateful. I kept my face soft, my voice light. "That's so thoughtful of you," I'd whisper. And as soon as they left, I wrote it down. The staff assumed I was harmless, just another old woman tucked away. But every evening, after my pills, and after the hallway lights dimmed, I pulled out a small notebook I'd hidden beneath my mattress. Its thin pages filled slowly, neatly, with dates, names, exact words spoken. Every transaction they mentioned, every document they referenced. I even recorded who was present during each conversation. The weight of my pen pressing into the paper felt stronger than my voice had felt in months. They thought the papers were my silence. They were my evidence. It wasn't just what they said, but what they didn't. The way my son avoided my eyes when finances were brought up. The way my daughter-in-law smiled too wide whenever I asked where my belongings had gone. I saw the tight glances they exchanged when they thought I wasn't paying attention. But I noticed. I noticed everything. One afternoon, while the nurse helped me into my chair by the window, she chatted absent-mindedly. "Your son mentioned they're consolidating some more assets next week. So much easier for families to handle things all in one place, isn't it?" She smiled, patting my arm gently. I nodded, but inside, my stomach tightened. They weren't finished. They were still stripping away what little I had left, but I had not been idle. I remembered old contacts, people they had forgotten I knew. The lawyer who once helped me write my original will, back when I first bought the house alone. The banker who had seen me through every loan payment, who knew my signature by heart. They had known me when my name still carried weight, before I became an afterthought to my own family. With the help of the facility's young social worker, a quiet woman with kind eyes who actually listened, I reached out to them, quietly, strategically. She made the calls from her office. No one needed to know. My lawyer was surprised at first, but once I explained, her voice firmed. "You're not helpless, Mrs. Cole, and you're certainly not powerless." The banker confirmed what I suspected. Accounts had been shifted, signatures applied where mine should have been required. It was all there. Sloppy, greedy, careless. My notebook grew heavier each night. Each entry, a thread in the web I was weaving. They thought they'd moved me out of the way, tucked me neatly into a room where my voice couldn't be heard, but they underestimated what silence can carry. They believed my stillness was surrender. They didn't see it was patience. In the quiet hours, while others slept, I practiced my breathing. Slow, even, controlled. I was preparing for something they couldn't imagine. Not revenge. Not screaming matches or angry confrontations. Something cleaner, stronger. Truth, sharpened into something undeniable. They thought the papers were my silence. I whispered to myself one night, watching the moonlight slide across my little room. They were my evidence. The storm was building. Not loud, not fast, but steady, focused. And this time, it belonged to me. The first meeting with my attorney was quiet. No big statements, no drama. She greeted me like an equal, not a fragile old woman who needed things explained in a slow voice. She shook my hand firmly, looked me in the eye, and said, "Let's get your life back, Mrs. Cole." And for the first time in months, maybe even years, I felt my spine straighten. I felt solid again. We sat together in that small, sunlit office as she carefully examined my notebook, page after page of dates, quotes, transactions, and names. I watched her eyes narrow, her head nodding slowly as the weight of my words built. "This is thorough," she said softly. They were careless. I had been patient. They had not. They assumed I would simply fade into silence. But my silence had teeth. The social worker arranged for a competency evaluation. Quietly, privately. A doctor sat with me for nearly an hour, asking questions, giving memory tests, reviewing my documents. I answered every question clearly, precisely. Dates, names, facts all delivered without hesitation. When it was over, she smiled gently and said, "You're perfectly capable, Mrs. Cole." I nodded. I already knew. The legal process moved faster than I expected. My attorney filed a motion to revoke the power of attorney, backed by my detailed documentation and the competency report. Fraud, coercion, and financial exploitation all laid out in black and white. My son and daughter-in-law were notified, summoned to a hearing. I imagined their faces when they opened those letters, the panic behind their polite smiles, the storm they never saw coming. The day of the hearing, I sat at the long conference table across from them. My son avoided my gaze. My daughter-in-law tried to hold her composure, but her eyes darted nervously to the lawyer beside her. Their attorney spoke first, attempting to soften the situation. "There seems to be a misunderstanding here," he said. "The family was simply trying to act in Mrs. Cole's best interest." My lawyer's voice was steady, sharp, but calm. With no legal authority, they sold her home, transferred her assets, and made financial decisions without her consent. Mrs. Cole has been declared fully competent. What occurred was not care. It was exploitation. She slid copies of my notebook forward. My handwriting. My record of everything they thought I hadn't noticed. The judge flipped through the pages in silence. My son shifted in his chair. My daughter-in-law squeezed his arm, whispering urgently. The air in the room grew heavy. And still, I said nothing. I didn't need to. My evidence spoke louder than any argument they could offer. The ruling came swiftly. The power of attorney revoked. All financial control returned to me. The sale of the house flagged for review. My accounts frozen to prevent further manipulation. Every piece of my life that they had quietly stolen was handed back. Not because I raised my voice, but because I prepared. Because I waited. Because I never stopped watching. They tried to approach me after the hearing. My son called out, "Mom, please, let's talk." But I kept walking. My daughter-in-law's voice trembled behind me. "We didn't mean for this to happen. You misunderstood, but I didn't misunderstand." I had understood from the very first moment they smiled and slid those papers across my kitchen table. And now, I walked out of that room, in the same slippers they thought I'd never leave in. But this time, I walked out owning my life again. The facility's doors closed behind me. The sunlight outside felt warm on my skin, steady and bright. My lawyer stood beside me, her hand gentle on my arm. "You're free," she said. I smiled. "I always was. They just forgot." The drive to my new apartment was quiet, peaceful. No one rearranging my things. No one speaking for me. The key turned smoothly in the door. My hands placed each dish in its rightful place. The bed was soft. The thermostat set exactly how I liked it. For the first time in a long time, everything belonged to me again. Not because I screamed, not because I begged, but because I was patient. I was prepared, and I was never as helpless as they wanted to believe. The power of attorney was the first to go. My attorney filed the paperwork within days of the hearing. The signatures that once gave them permission to run my life were officially stripped of power. Quietly. Legally. Completely. There was no argument left for them to make. No loopholes for them to slip through. Every time they signed my name on something I hadn't seen, they had believed they were building control. But they built it on sand. They built a plan on my signature. I burned it with my pen. Next were the accounts. The banker-kind man, older now but sharp, helped me close every joint account they had quietly attached themselves to. "We'll reopen everything in your name only, Mrs. Cole," he said with a respectful nod. The funds they siphoned for safekeeping were traced, frozen, and returned. The credit cards they once used freely were canceled with a single phone call. Every number that once connected them to my finances disappeared one by one, like lights flickering off in a house they thought they owned. I didn't call them. I didn't explain. They found out through certified letters. Neutral, official envelopes landing in their mailbox. Each one, a small, polite wall being raised between us. I imagined my son opening them, reading the words that told him gently but firmly that he no longer held any claim to what was mine. My daughter-in-law, pacing in their kitchen, fuming behind that polite smile she had practiced for years. But I wasn't there to see it. I didn't need to be. Then came the house. The house they had sold without my true consent. The court had halted the transaction pending investigation. And now, with full authority restored, I made my own decision. Not to reclaim it. Not to move back into walls that had once sheltered my sacrifice, but also my erasure. I sold it myself. On my terms. Clean. Final. The realtor handled it swiftly. A young family bought it, full of hope, laughter, and new beginnings. They would build their own memories there. Mine had already done their work. I didn't need those walls anymore. My son and his wife sent messages more now than they had in years. Voicemails, emails, texts, all carrying the same tune. "We're sorry. You misunderstood. We never meant to hurt you." But the music no longer played in my ears. I left each message unread, each voicemail unplayed. They had spoken clearly through their actions long before. I had heard them then. I had heard everything. Friends called too. Distant cousins. Old neighbors who had watched my house empty out, who had heard bits of the story through whispers. "Family can be complicated," they'd say gently. "They still love you, you know." I would smile softly and respond with polite nods. Love is not paperwork. Love is not signatures slid across tables. Love doesn't come wrapped in quiet theft. There was no need to argue, no need to shout. My revenge was not loud. It was precise, surgical. Every financial string they once tugged at was severed. Every door they once unlocked with my trust was closed. Every future plan they had built on my sacrifice was erased. And yet, they were still breathing, still living their lives. I had taken nothing from them that wasn't already mine. I simply reclaimed what was always supposed to belong to me. I moved into a small apartment near the park. Warm sunlight filled the windows each morning. My tea kettle whistled softly. as I arranged my things exactly how I wanted them, without someone suggesting what I did or didn't need. The furniture fit the space perfectly, not because it was new, but because it was chosen. By me. For me. The first evening, I sat on my little balcony as the sun dipped below the horizon. A soft breeze brushed my face. No tension in my chest. No dread of the next phone call. No voices rearranging my home while calling it help. Only peace. Real peace. They thought they'd locked me away. But I was never trapped. I was waiting. Preparing. And when my moment came, I didn't yell. I rescinded. There's a quiet kind of power in that. The kind they will never understand. The calls started almost immediately. My phone lit up every day. Sometimes twice. Sometimes more. My son's number. My daughter-in-law's brashcom. Text messages. Voicemails. Emails. Please, Mom, we need to talk. You misunderstood everything. We never meant to hurt you. Each message carefully worded. Like little ropes they were trying to throw out, hoping I'd grab hold and pull myself back into their hands. I read the first few. I listened to the first voicemail. His voice trembled, like a little boy caught in a lie. Mom, please don't do this. We're family. We were only trying to protect you. That word again, protect. It always sounded sweet coming from them, coated in syrup, but it was never protection. It was control. I didn't listen to the rest. I deleted the messages as they arrived, one by one. Then came the cards. Hallmark greetings stuffed with apologies. We love you. We made mistakes. Let's start fresh. Some had handwritten notes inside. My daughter-in-law wrote that the children missed me, that they didn't understand why Grandma didn't want to see them anymore. She always knew how to press where it hurt. But even that didn't work. Small packages started arriving too. Scarves, chocolates, little gifts they thought would soften me, remind me of better days. I left the boxes unopened, tucked them away into the back of my closet. The weight of those unopened boxes never felt heavy. It felt freeing. They were trying to buy their way back into my silence. But silence wasn't something they could purchase anymore. I had earned it. The cousins began to call. Friends from church. Neighbors. Their voices softened with concern, with that quiet tone people use when they don't want to take sides but feel they should say something. He's your son, dear. Maybe you're being too harsh. They were just worried about you. Families go through things. They didn't understand, or maybe they didn't want to understand. I listened to them all. I smiled. I nodded. And when they were done speaking, I answered only with gentle stillness. I didn't defend myself. I didn't explain. There was nothing left to explain. The facts lived on paper, in legal filings, in courtrooms. My heart no longer needed to carry the weight of proving anything to anyone. The apartment grew quieter each week. No more calls. No more deliveries. The world outside hummed along. But inside these walls, peace took root. Real peace. The kind that isn't temporary or brittle. The kind that sits in your chest like a steady heartbeat. I filled my days with quiet things. Morning tea on the balcony. Tending my little garden. Reading by the window as the sun arched across the sky. There were no awkward visits. No empty holidays spent, smiling across tense dinner tables. No forced small talk with people who had measured my worth against my belongings. I missed nothing. I mourned nothing. My solitude didn't feel lonely. It felt earned. Sometimes, in the soft stillness of the evening, I would think back not with anger, but with clarity. I gave them trust. They gave me betrayal. Now, I give them distance. I imagine they sit in their house now, the one they thought they would inherit. I imagine them glancing at each other across the kitchen they once rearranged behind my back, wondering when I'll respond, when I'll break the silence, when I'll call. They can wonder for as long as they like. That silence belongs to me, and I intend to keep it. They had my trust. They spent it carelessly. They had my loyalty. They drained it dry. They had my love, and they mistook it for weakness. Now, they have only their regret, and I carry nothing but my peace. The mornings are my favorite now. The sun peeks through my little kitchen window, casting long, soft beams across the worn table I chose for myself. I sit with my cup of tea, strong, hot, with a slice of lemon, just the way I like it, and watch the light slowly fill the room. The hum of the city is distant here, like a song playing softly in another room. For the first time in a long while, my world moves at my pace. The small balcony is where I find my hands happiest. Rows of potted flowers bloom under my care, marigolds, violets, and little herbs that sway gently with the breeze. Their colors are bright, unapologetic, reaching toward the sun like they know they belong. I tend to them slowly, speaking to them in whispers. No one brings me flowers, so I plant my own. There's no heaviness here. No tension waiting for a phone call that might not come. No strained smiles across a table where conversations pretend everything is fine. No quiet dread of being managed like a fragile object. My days belong to me now. I read for hours in my chair by the window. I bake small pies just for myself, filling the apartment with the sweet smell of cinnamon and sugar. The books stack gently beside me, stories that let me travel wherever I please, without anyone asking when I'll be done. I don't feel bitter when I think of what happened. Not anymore. The bitterness was heavy once. It used to sit in my chest like a stone. But over time, I let it go. Not for them, for me. I don't carry their choices anymore. They carry them. I live lighter now. There was a time I would have questioned myself, wondered if I had failed as a mother, if my sacrifices weren't enough, if somehow I had brought this upon myself by loving too deeply, giving too freely, hoping too much. But not now. I see it differently. I was never the fool. I gave what I gave out of love, not weakness. I worked, I provided, I built, and they made their choices in the face of all that love. Those choices are theirs to live with, not mine. They saw my age. I saw their character. My worth was never in the house, never in the bank accounts, never in the papers they tried to slide across my table with careful smiles. My worth was in every sacrifice I made to raise them, every night I stayed awake when fevers broke, every meal I cooked when the money ran thin, every coat I patched instead of buying new. My worth was never something they could sign away. The solitude is not empty. It's full of small joys, full of quiet strength, full of peace that wasn't handed to me, but earned moment by moment, breath by breath. I don't need their apologies. I don't need their explanations. I don't even need their understanding. I was never erased. I am still here, still steady, still warm. I sip my tea slowly, feeling the warmth spread through my hands, through my chest. The breeze carries the sweet scent of my balcony garden into the kitchen. I close my eyes and breathe it in. I have everything I need, everything I fought for, everything I saved for myself when they thought I had nothing left. No one brings me flowers, so I plant my own. It started with a flyer pinned to the community board in the lobby. Simple black letters on white paper. Women's Circle Thursdays at 2 p.m. stories. Support. Strength. I walked past it more than once before I allowed myself to stop. My fingers traced the edges of the paper, the quiet invitation speaking to something inside me that had long been waiting, not for rescue, not for sympathy, but for understanding. That Thursday, I sat quietly at the edge of a long wooden table. A few other women had already gathered, some chatting softly, some sitting in silence. There was no awkwardness, no introductions forced upon us, just a soft hum of shared space. They knew. Even before a word was spoken, we recognized something familiar in one another. The way we carried ourselves, the way our hands rested gently on the table, steady, still, the way our eyes held both weight and clarity. One by one, the stories came. Soft at first, like testing the temperature of a quiet lake. Small details. A son who helped with finances until there was nothing left. A daughter who convinced her mother to downsize into a home she didn't choose. A niece who managed paperwork while slowly taking control of an entire estate. The same patterns, different voices. No shouting. No bitterness dripping from their words. Just truth. Simple, steady truth. When it was my turn, I spoke softly. They smiled while they took everything. I said, And they thought I didn't notice. Heads nodded gently. No one gasped. No one offered pity. That's not what this was. This was recognition. The kind that moves quietly between women who have walked through the same fire and come out standing. We began writing letters together. Not to send, at least not always, but to release. To name what had been taken, to reclaim what remained. Some wrote to their children. Some to themselves. Some to the women who might come after us. Walking into similar storms. Unaware of what waits behind polite smiles. I wrote my letters with a steady hand. Each word placed carefully on the page. You are not foolish for trusting. You are not weak for loving. But you are stronger than you know. And you are not alone. We exchanged these letters sometimes. Read them aloud when the room felt strong enough to hold them. No one flinched at the hard parts. No one offered empty reassurances. We didn't need to be comforted. We needed only to be seen, to be heard. There were no protests in this room. No picket signs. No rage spilling out in loud bursts. That's not our way. We don't shout. We whisper in a language only survivors know. A language built from years of sacrifice, of quiet labor, of invisible wounds healed in silence. We pass strength between us like folded paper notes, small and weightless in the hand but heavy with truth. The social worker who runs the circle brings in women who are only just beginning to see what we've already lived through. They arrive with that same trembling uncertainty we once carried, unsure if what they feel is real, unsure if love is supposed to feel like being managed. We offer them our stories like a map, marking the quiet danger signs they may have missed, teaching them how to listen beneath the words, how to trust the pit in their stomach when something feels wrong. We don't tell them to fight with anger. We teach them to prepare, to watch, to document, to hold their voices steady until the moment comes to use them, to choose peace over rage, strategy over noise. When the sessions end, we sit quietly sometimes, sipping tea, watching the light shift through the window as the afternoon stretches on. We are not broken women. We are not lost mothers. We are builders still, carriers of wisdom, keepers of each other's strength. I leave those Thursdays lighter, fuller, not because my story has changed, but because I know now it was never mine alone. There are others like me, women who wore themselves thin with love, who trusted too deeply, who gave too much, and yet who now sit steady, planted like old trees, unmovable, unapologetic. And as we gather, week after week, exchanging glances that say more than words ever could, I realize I was never alone. Not then, not now, not ever. The final meeting with my attorney was quiet, like everything else I had done since I took my life back. The papers sat on the desk between us, crisp and orderly. But this time, I wasn't being guided through someone else's plan. This time, every word was mine. My attorney handed me the pen. I held it steady, felt the weight of it in my hand. "Whenever you're ready, Mrs. Cole," she said softly. And I signed, not with trembling, not with hesitation, but with full, deliberate strokes. They thought my last signature would be theirs, but it was mine. The will was simple, clean, purposeful. My name stood alone. My children's names were absent, not from anger, not from spite, but from clarity. They made their choices long ago. They wrote me out of their lives while I still breathed. Now, I wrote my truth. The house was gone. The money they tried to claim now found a home in places that would feel it, places that would carry my name with dignity. The local library, where I once sat with my young son reading stories while he rested his head against my shoulder. The women's shelter downtown, where others like me, women who gave everything and were left with nothing, could find a safe place to rebuild. And scholarships, given to young women with soft hearts but strong minds. Girls who would one day grow into mothers and grandmothers themselves, navigating a world that doesn't always reward the ones who give quietly. I left something else, too. Not property, not accounts, but letters. Dozens of them, written carefully by hand over long evenings, folded into soft envelopes. Letters meant for women I would never meet. Letters that would be slipped into care packages, scholarship notices, Shelter gift bags. Quiet companions for women standing at the edge of betrayal, unsure whether what they feel is real. You are not foolish for loving. You are not weak because they took from you. You are not invisible just because they stopped looking. You are not powerless. Not now. Not ever. I imagined those women opening my letters, feeling the weight of each word, knowing that someone else had stood exactly where they stand, that someone else had survived, that someone else had taken back what was hers not with shouting, but with quiet, steady hands. The attorney glanced at me as she slid the folder closed. "It's done," she said. "Exactly as you wanted." I smiled. Exactly. As I walked home that afternoon, the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in soft pinks and golds. The breeze was gentle. My steps were slow but strong. I passed families walking together, couples holding hands, children laughing as they chased each other down the sidewalk. Life moved forward. I didn't feel sadness watching them. My life had been full. My love had been true. What they did with my love was their burden, not mine. The apartment welcomed me home with its familiar quiet. The kettle whistled as I prepared my evening tea. My flowers on the balcony swayed gently, their colors still bold against the fading light. I ran my fingers along the edges of the envelope stacked neatly in their box, ready for the social worker to distribute. My legacy wasn't tied to bloodlines or inheritance. It was tied to truth, to strength, to women who might sit where I once sat, wondering if anyone sees them. They wrote me out. I wrote my truth. I sit now in the life I built for myself fully mine. No voices rearranging my world. No hands reaching for my choices. No eyes watching my bank accounts. Just me. Steady, free. The house they thought they would inherit is gone. The money they thought they could quietly shift into their pockets is locked away in futures they'll never touch. My peace isn't theirs to disturb anymore. I sip my tea and watch the moon rise slowly, calmly. They once believed I was fading, but I was only getting stronger. I was never lost. I was never defeated. The last signature was mine.